And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very exciting show today on this Friday, the 24th of June, 2022. And another glorious day here in Brisbane, where we are broadcasting from 11 degrees and it's sunny, but there is a little bit of a cloudy, it's smoky. Well, let's say smoky. There's like a bit of a haze around, bit smoky, 11 degrees and mostly sunny. So there you are, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Right now, let's get into the news for today. So today we have a very special segment where we interview Simon Tate, talking about how Australians are going to be tightening their purses. Well, tough times are coming, believe me you. So, we'll talk all about that in the interview section of today. But first, let's get this section of the news up to date. And then we will, of course, be looking at the Daily India Report as usual. But first of all, federal government. We'll go to federal government, then we'll go state by state. Federal government is forced to deal with big international challenges. Well, any incoming government always has lots of challenges.
The Albanese government's hit the ground running, meeting key foreign leaders,
deepening our defence and maritime cooperation. We're linked not just by geography, we are linked by choice.
And pivoting to the Pacific in its early days in power.
Permanent Secretary for Defence.
Amid an ongoing energy crisis, it signed off on its target for carbon emissions cuts.
Done.
And was buoyed by a hike to the minimum wage.
A 5.2% increase.
A pay rise of $40 a week.
But it faces a growing number of challenges, such as the rising costs of mortgages, food and fuel. When quizzed how they'll fix things, ministers usually hammer home variations on a constant theme.
You don't fix 10 years in 10 days.
There's no point mincing words about the sorts of conditions that we have inherited.
Most Australians will probably accept that message for now, but soon enough we'll start expecting the government to take ownership of these thorny topics. And in almost every policy area, ministers are going to be somewhat constrained by the state of the budget, which has no surpluses in sight and gross debt peaking at well over $1 trillion. The books have a structural problem. We're spending more than we're taking in.
We've baked in higher spending on things like aged care, defence, the NDIS, yet we haven't shifted at all in terms of our tax base. So we have an ongoing gap that potentially gets worse in a world where interest rates continue to creep up, and that's really the heart of the fiscal challenge.
Danielle Wood from the Grattan Institute says the government needs to start a difficult conversation over the next year about how the Commonwealth can pay for all the services Australians expect. But Labor's election commitment was not to raise taxes or have new ones except on multinationals, so cutting spending is the only other short-term option for reducing debt.
I expect the October budget will be simply about delivering on the promises that they took to the election. I think by the time we get to next May, those fiscal challenges are going to be really starting to bite, and I think tax has to be on the agenda. That may just be making the case for changes that the government might take to the next election.
Repairing the budget bottom line is politically challenging, but economists warn if the government doesn't start taking action in the coming years, then the nation could find it much tougher to respond to unexpected shocks. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is helping drive economic uncertainty across the globe. And next week, the Prime Minister will likely be urged to do more to support the war-torn country at a larger-than-usual NATO summit.
Look, we need more artillery pieces. We need more 155 ammunition for that artillery, howitzers. You've supplied 6 of those. They're good. We need more. We get 40 Bushmasters. It would be great to get another 20, so we make it 16 total.
Bushmaster – це австралійська бронемашина МРАП-класу.
The Bendigo-built troop-carrying vehicles have been gratefully received, and Ukraine is hoping for a formal announcement on further assistance, possibly even in Kiev, if Anthony Albanese takes up an offer to visit the country's president.
I think it's coming that we'll get a young boy called a Bushmaster. And I think it's coming. Bushmasters is probably the most recognized brand name of Australia in Ukraine right now, because if you mention Australia, the next thing you hear, Bushmasters.
During his European tour, the Prime Minister will also stop in Paris, where he hopes to further repair relations with French President Emmanuel Macron after recently reaching a compensation agreement over the scuttled submarine program. But amid the pomp and pageantry he'll be showered with on the trip, he's being urged to remain focused on Australia's biggest foreign policy challenge, an emboldened China.
They're trying to push us around and coerce us in our own region of immediate strategic concern. What will we do and what will America do if Xi Jinping says, OK, my friend Putin is keeping America and NATO Europe really preoccupied, and this will go on for some years, maybe now is the time for me to strike Taiwan.
The new Triforce arrangement will facilitate a comprehensive, layered defence strategy.
Paul Dibb was the main author of the 1987 Defence White Paper, which focused on how Australia could protect itself. The highly regarded intelligence analyst says our region today is arguably as unpredictable as any time since the end of the Second World War.
Our Prime Minister, our Foreign Minister and our Defence Minister need to keep in the centre deep of their minds, deeply etched in, their first priority is the defence of this country. That has to be their first priority.
Getting the priorities right, of course, as we know, that the defense comes first. Of course, you need to defend the nation. Well, there's some tough decisions there on behalf of the incoming government, but then, any incoming government always has these challenges. Of course, we know that any incoming government would first of all like to deliver on the election promises and get some of those key things out on the board and get some scores up on the board earlier in the phase. Some difficult ones might be lingering down and will be hard to deliver. 100% is never delivered, but if they can get the key ones out of the way and put some scores up there on the board, they would be doing quite well. Well, right now, going by state, let's first go to New South Wales, where the Premier orders investigation into Trade Commissioner's appointment.
The Premier has insisted the appointment of John Barilaro to a key international trade role was above board. Today, he ordered an investigation.
Well, I've directed the Secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet to conduct a review. He will provide that report to me. I will review it and I will make it public.
The former Deputy Premier was last week named the state's Trade Commissioner to the US. Emails obtained by the opposition shed further light on the recruitment process. In September last year, interviews had been carried out and a preferred candidate identified. A draft contract was being drawn up when, on September 21st, Investment New South Wales's General Counsel wrote to the head of HR saying, "We are now asked to consider whether there are alternative methods that Trade Commissioners could be employed. Specifically, we have been asked whether there is an option for ministerial appointments." On October the 1st, Gladys Berejiklian announced she was stepping down as Premier. 2 days later, the CEO of Investment New South Wales, Amy Brown, emailed the recruiter. We've now had confirmed instructions to commence the preparation of legislation to convert the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioners to statutory officers, i.e. ministerial appointments. This means that the recruitment process for the Trade Commissioner positions in Singapore, India, Middle East and China will need to be ceased. We will be handling the STIC New York position as an internal matter. The next day, John Barilaro announced he too was resigning from politics.
It certainly looks to me like it was a political intervention at the highest levels to deal with the political problem. Who was John Barilaro?
When contacted, John Barilaro referred the ABC to Investment New South Wales. We sent detailed questions to the agency and to the current Trade Minister Stuart Ayres' office, asking who instructed staff to change the roles to ministerial appointments and why. In reply, a spokesperson said the Trade Commissioners are public servants employed by Investment New South Wales. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News, Sydney.
Recruitment method, but we will find out what the investigation that's been ordered by the Premier brings about. Well, right now, opposition replies to the state's budget announcement, still in New South Wales.
This was Chris Minns's chance to present Labor's vision. The key that unlocks that future is to change the government, change our direction, Mr Speaker. There is a better way.
The opposition leader put forward small target policies in reply to the government's big spending budget. Labor has promised to build 100 preschools on public school sites in its first term of office. It also plans to increase toll relief for commuters by using the revenue from tolls on the Sydney Harbour Bridge and Tunnel. And it will set targets for government contracts and tenders to ensure more are awarded locally.
We should put behind us this crazy cultural cringe that says something made somewhere else must be better and cheaper than something we built in Australia here at home.
The opposition will also abolish the Transport Asset Holding Entity. The controversial body was set up by the government to manage the state's rail assets.
That Transport Asset Holding Entity will burn $13 billion hole in the New South Wales budget by 2031.
The government used question time to play down the speech.
Did that disappoint?
And picked holes.
Did we see a climate policy from the Leader of the Opposition? Did we see a health policy from the Leader of the Opposition? Did we see a women's policy from the Leader of the Opposition?
Labor was never going to announce a comprehensive list of policies this far out from the election. But the speech did give an indication of its direction, and that tackling the day-to-day cost of living pressures will be its priority to connect with voters.
I think they want a government that's listening to people and has a common sense plan for the future.
And today was their first chance to start listening to Labor's alternatives. Ashley Raper.
A common sense plan for the future. Well, if there is any such thing, that would be wonderful to have that. Well, right now, moving out of New South Wales, let's go to Northern Territory, where the energy success comes into question.
As the East Coast grapples with power shortages, it's been revealed the Northern Territory's guaranteed supply is falling short. Power and Water forced to source gas from other suppliers because its main provider, ENI, can't fulfil its commitment until the end of the year.
They're not meeting their obligation.
Not as it stands today, but in terms of moving forward, our expectation is that they will be in a position to do that.
And after the ABC reported top-end solar farms were sitting idle, energy executives were grilled over exactly how much power they were providing to the grid.
Less than 100 megawatts?
Yes, the solar farms combined are only worth about 50 megawatts, so yes, definitely.
The cost of transitioning to renewables far from affordable, approximately $850 million over 5 years.
Currently we have 9 large-scale generators going through the connection process with us, and in total that will see approximately 127 megawatts of solar, predominantly coming onto the Darwin-Catherine system in the near to medium term.
Power and Water's net debt is also set to rise to $1.3 billion next financial year, and it could mean higher power prices for consumers.
How that translates ultimately to electricity prices to customers remains to be seen. That is a decision that does sit with the Northern Territory government.
Power supply in the centre also scrutinised. Territory Generation says it's on track to implement recommendations following the 2019 System Black power outage in Alice Springs.
We've had a very good year in Alice Springs, touch wood.
Don't say that.
Well done.
I get nervous.
Celebrating the small wins for an industry in flux. Oliver Chaseling.
And of course, celebrating the small wins, as I mentioned before in one of the segments, is that it is always a balancing act, trying to find alternative sources for the energy. Of course, before we go into closing or shutting down old conventional methods, new methods must be tried, tested and ready to roll, because this is a necessity. There is a guaranteed supply in many areas which need to be met. Well, from there we'll go to Western Australia, where the Agriculture Minister is meeting farmers on ending live sheep trade.
The southern half of WA is merino country, but farmers say that could change if Labor goes ahead with its plan to end the live sheep trade.
As a seed stock producer, I've got clients that are already talking of moving away from sheep and going to more cropping because of live export, and that talk.
The live export of sheep to the Middle East provides a market for older animals.
They really like the hogget product and they're quite happy to take it.
Analysts are confident there'll be countries who'd take more meat slaughtered and boxed in Australia, like new free trade partner India.
Does hinge very much on the processing in WA, and there's only a handful of processors as it stands now, and there's not a lot of staff to be able to kind of man those processing sites.
Analysis by Thomas Elder Markets shows that as a percentage of the WA sheep flock, the number going to live export has been declining. For example, of the 13.6 million sheep in Western Australia last year, fewer than 600,000, or just 4.1%, went to live export. But truck drivers say a halt to sheep exports will hit them hard.
Ready when you are, boys. Let them come.
If that's phased out or banned, myself and all my fellow colleagues in the livestock transport industry would lose minimum 30% of their revenue.
For some in the regions, this issue has become emblematic of the city-country divide. There's also concern among producers that now that there's traction on banning this industry, live cattle may be next.
Our policy only relates to the export of live sheep and has no implications whatsoever for live cattle.
Labor's flagged a potential co-investment in a new abattoir as part of the live sheep phase-out. Eliza Borrello, ABC News.
So there you are, and I do have a very strong view and point on that, which I have said before and maintained, and I still maintain that. But right now, let's go on to Adelaide, where we were talking about this energy crisis, to have alternative sources. So we have the grids. So as the demand grows, and if there is too much pressure on one grid, it sort of another grid gets locked in. So when there are changes and all these changes of another grid coming in and joining in, there has to be some disturbance, and there have been lights that have been flickering in the streets and Adelaide houses due to grid disturbances.
The Illuminate Festival is set to light up the city next month, but it was a light show of a different kind on display in homes across Adelaide this morning.
You might have noticed that there's some lights dimming and flickering across the system.
Electronet says voltage issues stemming from a new wind farm at Port Augusta caused the fluctuations.
It's not unusual to have issues in commissioning, but ones that are noticed, like the voltage fluctuations early this morning, are less usual.
So I've been advised by the Australian Energy Market Operator that it contained no threat to the national electricity grid.
No threat perhaps, but the ABC understands at least one major industrial user chose to temporarily disconnect, while some households have reported their home battery systems kicked in between the hours of 1 and 5 a.m. While the source of the issue is known, the exact cause isn't. Problems with the wind farm's controls or physical infrastructure, two possible explanations.
So really it's for the wind farm operator to conduct an investigation and identify what the issue was. Until we're satisfied about all that, the generator won't be connected back to the grid.
Authorities insist the problem in SA had nothing to do with the early morning return of the national electricity market after a week of centralised control by the grid operator.
So we returned the market to more normal operations at 4 o'clock this morning. That's been going smoothly.
The federal government says there was excess supply today, but it's monitoring the situation closely. Isabel Damon, ABC News, Adelaide.
And the situation needs to be monitored because, as I mentioned before, that the basic necessity and the guaranteed supply really needs to be there. Well, okay, so right now, even though there's light flickering in Adelaide, supercars are due to return to Adelaide. Here's some good news.
Sealed with a signature.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
The Adelaide 500's return officially given the green light with a 5-year deal as the final round of the annual supercar season.
South Australians crave motorsport. Australians are willing to travel for great motorsport events.
The Premier beaming, but wouldn't say how much the agreement has cost taxpayers.
What I am happy to say is that in the context of what we were paying to not host the event, paying to host it makes a lot more sense for the state's economy.
The former government axed the event in 2020 and paid for it to not happen last year. The Reborn Race's new end-of-season slot is similar to the one occupied by the Grand Prix through the 1980s and 90s.
We know there's a lot of things that are profound about that, not only the grand final status, but for this year, it's the final time that you're going to see a Holden on the racetrack.
But a rough road lies ahead before the event returns on December 1, with major road resurfacing needed to more than half of the track and pit complex. Organisers and Supercars officials touring Victoria Park this afternoon.
We're going to get this done and it's going to be brilliant.
Not so brilliant, Adelaide dropping down the Economist's Global Livability Index from the third-ranked city last year to 30th.
The fact that it slipped back throughout the course of calendar year 2021 is unfortunate, but I suspect we'll creep back up the tables again now that the worst of COVID hopefully has passed us by.
Doctors say this week in Adelaide's emergency departments has been among the worst they can remember, with an industrial dispute breaking out between their union and the health department over a push by medical officers to take action by wearing T-shirts. Months ago, the now government was openly encouraging paramedics to chalk protest messages on their ambulances.
Rank hypocrisy from Peter Malinauskas. We say, sort out the health system, get on with what you promised, end the platitudes and do your job.
The Premier says that's exactly what he's doing. Rory McLaren, ABC.
Well, the Premier says he is doing what he is required to be and is doing this job and to the best of his ability. Well, right now, it's time to go to today's the interview. And today we are talking about the pace or the tightening of the pace. How can we do that and what has been happening? So our new study has revealed this mistrust tightens Aussie pace strings. Research reveals Aussies have high expectation when it comes to their purchasing habits, with over half of Aussies saying that they will stop purchasing from brands that break their trust. That is quite true. While 3/4 plan to spend at least $700 or more per year with brands they do trust. New research finds a strong correlation between brand trust and consumer behaviour, with more than half of Australians, meaning 54%, saying they will stop purchasing from brands that break their trust. Well, right now, with me in the studio via our phone link, we have Simon Tate, the president of Adobe Asia Pacific. Simon has over 20 years of IT veteran with rich experience across a variety of business developments and leadership roles in Asia Pacific. He has served on a number of advisory boards with technology companies in the early stage of funding and holds copyright over the professional 6G risk management methodology, now used by an estimated 5,000 plus B2B salespeople globally. So before joining Adobe, Simon worked with companies such as Netcom, Gateway Computers, Hummingbird, OpenText, Dell, EMC, SAP, and Salesforce. Some of those names are quite familiar, some which might not be familiar. The three values Simon has firmly anchored himself to throughout his career are fun, family, and freedom. What great values to live by, Simon. Well, once again, Simon, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, it is wonderful to have you on the show. Well, right now, Simon, as we know, we have done this research. Could you tell us a little bit more about the research?
The research theme was trust. And why I think trust is so critically important is because it crosses the borders of brand values, data and privacy, customer experience, and artificial intelligence. And when you think about it, trust really is at the center of every single transaction. Why I think the results of the research are so fascinating is because the whole theme of trust changed. Now, of course, trust has to be earned and maintained in a completely digital sense.
And quite true, Simon, that trust has to be earned. It is never demanded, so is respect as well. So, when we're talking about trust, why is trust so important to Aussies when spending monies and especially on brands?
We all know trust is the great equalizer, and now it is a non-negotiable. If you don't have a trusted brand, your ability to win new customers and to keep those customers loyal to you is vastly diminished. We know that 66% of consumers will stop buying from you as a company if they feel that they can't trust you. So you get one shot at it. 40% of consumers will spend more money with you if you do have a trusted brand. Trust needs to be earned and then sustained.
And of course, quite well said, Simon, that trust has to be earned and then sustained. Winning the trust is one thing, but sustaining or maintaining that is another matter. So when we look at companies, we know that companies rely on consumers. So how can companies earn the trust of their consumers?
The first thing is to make sure that companies are being open and transparent with how they use consumers' data. When it comes to trust, everyone is still a little nervous about how companies collect personal data and how they use that personal data. So the first thing business leaders need to get their head around is how can they be much more open and transparent and to provide choice to their customers about how they collect their data and what they use their data for. Personalization is definitely a trust multiplier.
Well, of course, personalization, when that trust is there, then consumers will come back and will pay you, many folds for that trust that you have. So, looking at the overall scheme of things, what advice do we have for Aussies wary about breaches of trust? As we know, that this is something that we always have to look at. So what advice do you have for us?
I would say to Australians, be far more interested in how companies are collecting and using your data. Look at the trust report, read the privacy statement, and educate yourselves on exactly what their data policies are.
Okay, so the data policies, looking at the privacy policies of companies, is something that everyone can look out for, and then build that trust. So, of course, there's so much on that we can discuss on this segment. There is so much more information out there. So, if anyone is looking for a little bit more information, where can they go, Simon?
If you really want to learn more about trust and how trust impacts your ability to interact with a brand or a product or a service, the trust report is published by Adobe and it's on the Adobe website, so I would encourage everyone to have a look at that. And make sure you understand what you're signing up for when you choose to transact in a digital world with these companies.
And that is quite true, Simon, that, in this today's day and age, many times if you're doing a search, you come up with so many different, whatever you search for, you're trying to find out about something rather than getting an answer. You'll get third-party ones coming up. And what will look like is just a simple thing that they will give you some information. First of all, they'll ask for information and all your information is taken. Even though it's offered free, they will still ask for your credit card detail. They say you will not be charged until you take on, or it's free for 7 days, and after that it might go onto a plan unbeknownst to you unless you know. So you be very careful about that. So once again, Simon, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing this valuable information with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So there were, ladies and gentlemen, that was Simon Tate from Adobe, and some very good advice from him there. And right now, moving on, it's time to go to our Daily India report. And then we will finish off the segment today with looking at functions and events. As we know, today is Friday. Hey, it is Friday, and thank God it is Friday. Looking forward to lots of functions and events in the weekend. We'll talk about some of them. But right now, here's the Daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and much more on India and the Indian diaspora. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to visit Germany and UAE on June 26 to 28. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Germany as a special guest at the G7 summit on June 26 to 27 before travelling to the United Arab Emirates on his way back to hold meetings with the top leadership of the country. Modi will go to the German resort of Schloss Ilmau at the invitation of Chancellor Olaf Scholz for the G7 summit. He is expected to deliver a speech at the two sessions that will focus on the environment, energy, climate, food security, health, gender equality and democracy, the ministry said. To strengthen international collaboration on all important issues besides India, countries such as Indonesia, South Africa, Argentina and Senegal have been invited to the summit of the group of 7 of the world's advanced economies. On the sidelines of the summit, Modi will also hold bilateral meetings with the leaders of some of the countries participating in the summit. The last time that Modi visited Germany was in May 2022 with the senior members of the United Cabinet for the India-Germany intergovernmental consultations. During the visit in May, India and Germany signed several agreements on sustainable development that will provide India with 10 billion euros in aid by 2030 to expand the use of clean energy. At the time, Scholz described India as a central partner for Germany in Asia in terms of economy, defense and climate policy. High-level economic Indian delegation visits crisis-hit Sri Lanka. The economic crisis has worsened in Sri Lanka with demand and queues for essential commodities getting longer. At this crucial moment, no country except all-weather friend India has been extending food, medicine and fuel supplies and financial help to the crisis-hit island nation. Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe fears the worst crisis is looming over the nation and has hinted at a possibility of an acute shortage of food in the coming September. India's high-level delegation led by Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageswaran is visiting Sri Lanka on June 23rd. According to sources, the delegation will stay in the country only for 3 hours and hold talks with both the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. The visit comes after the meetings held by Sri Lankan envoy Milinda Murakoda with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in New Delhi on June 20th. India is currently in the process of finalizing another credit line of US $500 million for Sri Lanka to purchase oil. The country is undergoing its worst ever economic crisis with people queuing up for miles at the filling stations. ISRO's commercial arm to launch its second mission on June 30th. Indian Space Research Organization's commercial arm, New Space India Limited, is all set for its second mission that will place 3 foreign satellites into the orbit. The space agency's workhorse, PSLV, will execute the mission on June 30th from the second launch pad at Satish Dhawan Space Centre, Sriharikota. The launch is scheduled at 6 p.m. and the 25-hour countdown will begin at 5 p.m. on June 29. The PSLV C-53 is the second dedicated commercial mission of New Space India Limited. It is designed to orbit TS-EO satellite along with 2 other co-passenger satellites from ST Electronics Singapore, announced the agency on June 22nd. This will be the 55th mission of PSLV and the 15th mission using the PSLV core alone version. The 4-stage, 44.4 meters tall rocket weighing 228.433 tons will carry 3 satellites, a 365 kg TS-EO satellite with 0.5 m resolution imaging capability and a 155 kg new SAR, both built by Starrec Initiative, Republic of Korea. Indian Space Research Organization has previously launched 9 customer satellites in Israel, Italy, Japan and USA under a commercial arrangement with New Space India Limited. The agency also shared that the mission will have PSLV orbital experimental module to conduct in-orbit scientific experiments using the spent PS-4 stage as an orbital platform subsequent to the separation of the satellites. WHO approves India's Hyderabad-based Biological E as an additional manufacturing site for Janssen and J&J COVID vaccine. Hyderabad-based pharmaceutical company Biological E has received WHO's approval to be an additional manufacturing site for the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. Biological E, the manufacturer of the Corbevax vaccine, has an alliance with Johnson & Johnson on the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine. The National Drugs Controller had in April this year cleared children as young as 5 years old to be vaccinated with Biological E's Corbevax. While Hyderabad-based Biological E is a manufacturer of Corbevax, the beginning of the vaccine can be traced to the National School of Tropical Medicine at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. The school had been working on recombinant protein vaccines for coronaviruses SARS and MERS for a decade. Yoga exhibition with interactive elements showcases history. The exhibition organized by the Ministry of Ayush at Mysuru's Dasara ground on the occasion of International Day of Yoga 2022 showcased the ever-increasing global impact of the Asian practice that has evolved over time. The two-day exhibition was inaugurated on 21st June by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who earlier led a mass demonstration of yoga at the iconic Mysore Palace. Modi was joined by Union Ayush Minister Sarbananda Sonowal, Karnataka Governor Thawarchand Gehlot and Chief Minister Basavaraj Bobai. The exhibition had two elements, digital and static. The first ever digital yoga exhibition attracted the visitors' attention by promoting yoga with the help of the latest technologies, including augmented reality, which challenged visitors to practice yoga postures correctly. The exhibition also highlighted the major initiatives taken by the Ministry of Ayush, including the WHO Global Centre for Traditional Medicine in Gujarat's Jamnagar, for which Modi laid the foundation stone in April this year. Some of the other major initiatives highlighted at the exhibition involved Sova Rigpa, yoga as a competitive sport, developing standards on Ayush systems, among others. Six-month-long NRI festival to be held from July 2022, Tourism Minister launches logo. A first-of-its-kind NRI festival is being held in India from July 2022 onwards. The logo of the festival was launched by Tourism Minister Shripad Yeso Naik. The tagline of the logo, "Connecting Sentiments," was indicative of the fact that this NRI festival is being held more as an emotional connection with the Indian diaspora population rather than any commercial association. The brief function began with a short promo on the NRI festival, beginning with the sacrifice of our great freedom fighters in getting us independence, and went on to showcase the growth we made in the field of culture, yoga and sports as we celebrate 75 years of our independence and commemorate the same by celebrating it in the form of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. US President Joe Biden nominates Indian American as top science advisor. US President Joe Biden nominated Indian American Dr. Aarti Prabhakar as the next White House science advisor as his administration aims to leverage science, technology and innovation. If confirmed by the Senate, Dr. Prabhakar will be Biden's chief advisor for science and technology, a co-chair of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, and a member of the President's cabinet. Today, President Biden announced his intent to nominate Dr. Aarti Prabhakar to serve as the Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and once confirmed to this position, also as Assistant to the President for Science and Technology. In this capacity, Dr. Prabhakar will be the President's Chief Advisor for Science and Technology, a co-chair of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, and a member of the President's Cabinet, the White House said in a statement. Biden described Dr. Prabhakar as a brilliant and highly respected engineer and applied physicist. Assam flood situation remains grim with over 55 lakh people affected. The flood situation in the Indian state of Assam continued to remain grim, with rising water levels of the Brahmaputra and Barak rivers inundating the fresh areas in the state and impacting over 55 lakh people across 32 districts. 89 people have lost their lives since mid-May due to the two deluges, they said. Assam State Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma travelled to Nagaon by train to review the situation in flood-hit areas in the district, the official said, adding that he was also scheduled to visit a few relief camps there. Nagaon was severely affected by the current wave of floods, with over 4,57,381 people coming under the impact of the deluge, and 15,188 inmates have taken shelter in 147 relief camps. Sarma visited Chaparmukh railway station to interact with flood-affected people taking shelter there and took stock of the relief materials provided to them. The flood situation in the three districts of the Barak Valley, Kachar, Karimganj and Hailakandi remain critical, with rising water levels of the Barak and Kushiara rivers inundating vast tracts of land in the valley, the official said. National Disaster Response Force personnel have been engaged in Kachar districts to evacuate people to safe places, while representatives of the State Disaster Response Force and other agencies were deployed in two remaining districts. Record booking for the upcoming Varun Dhawan and Kiara Advani starrer Juk Juk Jio before its release on 24th June. Dharma Productions is all set to release its first film post the pandemic in the theatres with Juk Juk Jio. The family entertainer produced by Dharma Productions in association with Viacom 18 stars Varun Dhawan, Anil Kapoor, Neetu Kapoor and Kiara Advani, and it promises to deliver quintessential Karan Johar elements that include love, laughter, dance, drama and music. The film has sold a total of 15,500 tickets for the opening day for its Friday shows at 3 key multiplex chains in India, namely PVR, Inox and Cinepolis till 22nd June. Now all eyes remain on how many tickets the film sells on the opening day on 24th June. That's all in today's bulletin.
Wonderful Cairns Convention Centre, which our government has put in the money for the refurbishment and expansion, over $175 million. We look forward to showcasing our investment to the rest of the community.
Order.
And jobs. I take the
Order. Premier, sorry, members to my left, you may appreciate I actually really want to hear this statement. Premier, you have the call.
Thank you. We love Cairns. I love Cairns. Mr. Speaker, the last regional parliament and my local members love Cairns too. The last regional parliament was in Townsville and was a great success. The people of Cairns in the far north deserve their chance to see the parliamentary process from the public gallery, and we're absolutely looking forward to it. Mr. Speaker, June is when we celebrated our escape from New South Wales 163 years ago. And on Queensland Day, 6th of June, it was my honour to announce this year's Queensland Greats. Indigenous Elder Uncle Albert Holt, Usman Khawaja for youth and multicultural work, Burns Doctor Dr Stuart Pegg, Elsa Shepherd, a pioneering engineer, First Nations advocate Graceland Smallwood, Peter Timms for his koala conservation work, Minister for Environment, very pleased, and world-famous artist the late Sally Gabori, and our world-leading Queensland Museum network. Again this year we were inspired by every recipient, every story, every great achievement. I also congratulate the 119 Queenslanders named in the Queen's Birthday Honours. One of them was Ash Barty, who had a very significant moment this week. She and her childhood coach, Jimmy Joyce, had a last hit at the West Brisbane Tennis Centre in my electorate of Inala at Richlands before it quietly closed for the last time. After more than 50 years, the old Richlands courts, which nurtured one of our greatest champions that we've ever seen, have passed into history. It's the end of an era for my local area and for our state's sporting heritage. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish Ali Brigginshaw and her team all the best for their State of Origin clash in Canberra tonight. Origin is a great spectacle, Mr. Speaker, but tonight's game is particularly important in the context of women's sport. For the last time in history, the Women's State of Origin will be a winner-takes-all. Next year, the series will grow to a two-match format as the women's NRL competition expands from six teams to 10. Mr. Speaker, this is great for the women's game, and it's great for Queensland with more footy to inspire our next generation of athletes in years to come.
That announcement, which we had to include very quickly, coming all the way from the Parliament House. Well, right now it's time to go to our functions and events and take a look at what's happening in Brisbane. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you in today's segment. Don't forget that tomorrow we have the interview and a very good live coverage of what's going to be happening at the Sai Baba Palki Festival when we have all the members of the Science Institute here talking about that, and Guru Sai Saleswarji will be here as well speaking about the Palki Festival. So looking forward to your company tomorrow at 9 o'clock with the news and 10 a.m. with that very, very special interview. Well, until then, it's goodbye from us. It's been wonderful having your company on this 24th day of June. Still, the sunlight time is very, very short during this time of the year on this side of the world. Well, until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me.